Have you ever wondered what really goes on inside a trauma therapy session? I mean, not just the theories, but the actual step-by-step process? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain. We're going deep inside the process, using the actual patient and therapist manuals to see how the crucial middle phase of healing really works. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll get into the heart of the therapy itself. Then we'll look at how memories are revisited safely, unpack this idea of hotspots, and see how daily practice fits in. It's all leading to that one big goal, processing the trauma. All right, we're diving right into the core of it, what the manuals call the intermediate sessions. This is really where the heavy lifting happens, and it's all built on two powerful tracks that run side by side. Think of it like this. The therapy uses a two-pronged attack to tackle the problem. On one hand, you've got imaginal exposure. That's the internal work, right? Safely going back to the memory inside the therapy session. But then, and this is so important, you have in-vivo exposure. That's all about taking that new strength and confidence back out into the real world. One helps process the past, the other helps reclaim your future. You really need both engines firing for it to work. So let's zoom in on that first engine, imaginal exposure. This is the main event during the session, recounting the memory. And the way it's done is incredibly specific, incredibly deliberate. So here's a really interesting detail. A key instruction is for the person to talk about the memory in the present tense, as if they are right back there, living it at that moment. But why? What's the reason for that specific instruction? It's definitely not just a random storytelling choice. And the reason is, well, it's pretty profound. The goal here isn't to re-traumatize someone, not at all. It's to give them a chance to finally access the raw emotions of that memory, but this time in a completely safe and controlled space. See, it's by fully connecting with those feelings, not running from them, that the brain can finally say, okay, I see this, and file it away correctly, stripping it of its power. And get this, we're not talking about a quick 5-minute recap of what happened. The manual actually instructs the therapist to guide the patient through this memory for 40 to 45 minutes straight, without any interruptions. And there's a really critical reason for that specific length of time. This is where the magic really starts to happen. By staying with that distressing memory for that long, you essentially outlast the initial spike of anxiety. Your nervous system literally runs out of alarm bells to ring. It's a process called habituation. The anxiety peaks, and then it naturally starts to fall, teaching your brain this incredibly powerful lesson. This memory feels awful, but I am actually safe. It's not happening now. So after a few sessions of going through the entire memory, the therapy kind of shifts gears. It starts to zero in on the most difficult, most distressing parts of the memory. The manuals have a name for these, hotspots. So what exactly is a hotspot? Well, think of it as the emotional epicenter of the event. It's that one specific moment or image or sound that still holds the most emotional charge, the most pain, the most fear. The patient workbook has this absolutely brilliant analogy for this. It compares working on a hotspot to a massage therapist finding a deep, painful knot in a muscle. You don't just ignore it or work around it, right? You focus on it, gently and repeatedly, until that tension finally releases. And the process for doing this is super methodical. First, you and the therapist identify that knot. Then, you focus only on that one part of the memory, repeating it, sometimes even in slow motion. The goal, as the manual says, is to wear it out until its emotional punch starts to fade. And then, you move on to the next one. But, all this incredibly intense work that happens in the session, that's really only half the story. The progress is truly cemented and made real through the daily practice that happens outside the therapist's office. And what's so cool here is you get to see both sides of the coin. On the left, from the patient's workbook, you see these self-reflection questions like, is my anxiety and distress going down? And then on the right, from the therapist's manual, you see instructions for them on how to review that progress and offer support. It's a real partnership. And this really shows you that therapy homework isn't some vague idea like, go think about this. No, it's structured. Patients use forms just like this one to track their daily practice, what they did, how they felt. It creates this really clear record of all the work they're doing and the progress they're making. And the manuals get super specific with practical advice to make sure this homework is both safe and effective. It's not about just passively listening to a recording. It's about actively connecting with what you're hearing. And you can see these crucial boundaries too, like making sure you're in a private place and definitely not listening right before you go to sleep. That's all about protecting that time for your brain to rest. Okay, so after all of this intense work, both in the session and at home, what's the end game? What is the ultimate goal here? Well, it all comes down to one key concept: processing. This might be the single most important thing to understand. The goal of this kind of therapy is not to make you forget what happened. That's just not possible. The goal is to fundamentally change your relationship with the memory, to take it from being this constant, painful intruder in your life to just being a part of your story that no longer controls you. And you know you're making progress when it's not just about the distress going down. It's about gaining a new understanding, a new perspective. According to the manuals, it's when you start having new insights, when those heavy emotions like shame and guilt start to lose their grip, and when the memory just becomes, well, a memory, instead of a crisis that's happening over and over again. And just to give you a sense of how powerful these hotspots can be, this is a direct quote from the manual. It's an example of the kind of terrifying thought that can come up during this work. But by bringing a thought like that out into the open in a safe place, you can finally examine it with the therapist and rob it of its hidden power. And all of this really leaves us with a final, kind of provocative thought. The whole process we've just walked through suggests that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about transforming it. It asks us to think about how a memory can change from a crippling weight that defines your everyday into a part of your story that you carry, but that no longer carries you.